Matt, I will throw this out to extend on your point concerning where this program is headed and that standard of excellence that needs to be in mind. And until it's achieved, hey, we need to be on edge because the goal has yet to be achieved. We have yet to reach our rightful place in college football. This USC team, to me, is a bit of a wild card. Um, and I don't know that that's necessarily going to be reflected in the Big Ten standings because I think that upper tier is extremely strong. The probable top three, certainly the top two, are going to be difficult to unseat. That USC could have an outstanding season, and maybe they are a fourth team from the Big Ten to reach the college football playoff at 10-2, or a down USC from a standings perspective is going to be buffeted by that underbelly of the Big Ten. I can't see them dropping any lower than sixth or seventh in the conference. So they are in a sense, you would think by all probabilities, positioned there. But how that is achieved and what it looks like, and that record that could deviate between roughly 10-2 and 7-5, not that they can't beat every team on their schedule, but to surpass a 10-2 record may be a little bit too much to ask. I just think that there's a lot of factors in place. Miller Moss, okay. Dillon Gabriel is the premier quarterback in the conference as we enter the season, but he is not a future NFL star quarterback. He is not of that ilk. He's a really, really accomplished college quarterback. We could get to the conclusion of this season, and Miller Moss could be the best quarterback in the Big Ten. It is possible that he could be considered the best quarterback in the conference by season's end. He could also slip and become the fifth or sixth best quarterback in the conference. I would be surprised, based on Lincoln Riley's tutelage, that he would slip any further than that. The offensive line, which on the first line is strong, depth issues, concerns there. Gets beaten up by teams across the Big Ten defensively. The defensive front, there are some really good individual players led by Bear Alexander, but again, depth concerns and so forth that this team could teeter on. And what I've pointed out in the past, what I consider not to be a gauntlet of a schedule, but just competent team after team after team, that if this team does not play a slew of one-score games, I will be fairly surprised. And with Notre Dame and LSU in the non-conference, you could be looking at the same football team, and based on a missed kick or a muffed punt or a bounce of a ball, could be 2-0 in those two key non-conference games, or 0-2 and pretty much be the same team. It's going to be a narrow path to success, I believe, for USC, but I believe that they have the talent to do it, and certainly a head coach that has accomplished success in winning conference championships. So it's an intriguing team, and I will finish on this note. Again, my favorite Voice of College Football created statistic would be the plus or minus 3 quotient from the previous season. And USC has been a component in that the last two seasons. 4-8, 11-1, 7-5. And more than 1/3 of the sport, folks, last season had a plus or minus 3 difference in win total from the previous season. Could USC, a 7-5 regular season team last year, jump to 10-2?
You know, I know that you love baseball. I love baseball. And one of the things I always do in terms of preseason baseball predictions, if there was a team the previous year that was like 43-15 in one-run games, I'm immediately selling stock in that team the following season. And it's not that that team wasn't good, like it's not as though they didn't get a lot of big outs or a lot of clutch hits in the 8th, 9th, 10th innings, but just in baseball, a law of averages game mapped out over 162. Just the odds say you're not going to be ridiculously good in one run, really close cliffhanger games in consecutive seasons. And the times that I've applied that, it's usually borne out that teams had a lot of regression to the mean after they were wildly successful in one-run games the previous season. So, that can certainly work in USC's favor. That, the Notre Dame game was a blowout. The Washington game was a shootout, but it felt as though Washington was in control most of the way. But you do think, if USC can continue to score mid-30s, low 40s, and then you get what we've been talking about all off season, a defense that isn't, spectacular, but just give me top 40, give me even top 35. If USC's defense is top 35 in scoring and most of the other basic measurements, and you get, a decent, historically representative Lincoln Riley offense, that's probably going to be a pretty good formula for the Trojans. And I do think that we are going to have a top 40 defense. Again, my main concern is the offensive line. I think that if the offensive line protects Moore and Moss, it all comes together. But will that starting offensive line remain healthy? And because when Gino Quinones went down last season, it's not as though he was the pillar of the team, but his presence there was really important. He was a veteran. He was smart. He knew the system. And when he went out, you definitely saw a drop off in overall performance from the offensive line. Of course, Justin Dedich struggling, some of the other incoming transfers struggling. Tim Prangley, of course, mentioned Ethan White, having to retire from football. So that became a blank. It became a wasted effort in the portal. USC wasn't able to plug a player in with a lot of size and bulk, which White was going to bring to the table. So Gino Quinones, that was an unexpectedly severe domino effect from, a player who was not viewed as an All-American, but just one piece of the puzzle. It showed the frailty of USC's offensive line situation. But if the offensive line does come together, I think that the defensive side of the ball, the defensive portion of this larger formula, it's going to fall into place. But we know that football is an attritional sport. So there are likely to be injuries at some point. And you just hope that they're not to the nerve center level players along that USC offensive line. But to circle back to your larger point, USC was on the wrong side of some small margins last year. Utah was a representative game. Oregon couldn't blow out. Oregon should have been a lot better than just 9 points better than USC. So you think that if USC can make some substantial roster improvements, the ceiling for this team might be higher than a lot of national pundits, the people who are putting USC 23rd in the AP poll. USC's ceiling might be a lot higher than what the national consensus is. So that boomerang factor and your plus or minus 3 quotient could definitely work in USC's favor this season. Absolutely.
As we conclude a 14 playoff, looking forward to, of course, the 12-team playoff here in 2024 and the expanded opportunity that everyone will enjoy and what USC could have done. There's a lot of statistics, obviously, that have come out throughout the offseason in regards to what college football has looked like during the 14 playoff era. And here's a stat I came across the other day, courtesy CFB Home. And so can you imagine, as I will try to sort this out for you, Matt, these are number of top 10 wins that every program in the Power Four have achieved during the 10-year playoff era. And the first 3 or 4 are what you would expect. Alabama 23, Ohio State 22, Georgia 20, and on down the line. LSU at 17. Practically half of those were during the one season of 2019. Maybe there were half there. USC, consider that they defeated over a 10-year span 5 top 10 teams. So the likes of Baylor, Utah, Mississippi State, Stanford as well, Washington within the conference, Oklahoma State, TCU, Michigan State had 9. That number surprised me, even though we know how successful Mark D'Antonio was for a few seasons there at the beginning of the playoff era. For USC to be buried that low for a 10-year period, man, it is time for this program to be resurrected.
And it shows that outside of Sam Darnold riding in on his cape for 1.8 seasons, he wasn't there for the first 3 games of 2016 before Clay Helton finally got religion. But if it wasn't for Sam Darnold riding to the rescue, that number probably would be what, 1, 2? So yeah, it's just shows how damaged a brand USC is. And Lincoln Riley lifted it up in 2022, but then couldn't sustain it in 2023 because he didn't have that depth provided by Clay Helton. Clay Helton did not leave him much. I mean, Clay Helton left him a really good starting offensive line for 2022, but outside of that, not a whole lot. And it was Caleb Williams and Jordan Addison and Travis Dye needing to freshen up that offense. So it really just speaks to how much Clay Helton hollowed out the USC program.